Morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. So this webinar is going to introduce our new bank confirmation tool, CCH iFirm Validate. So this webinar is around how you can use this tool as part of either an accounts preparation or an audit job. So a bit of background on me, if we've not met previously. I've worked in technology in one way or another for 18 years. Prior to that, I was in practice, and prior to that, for my sins, I was at HMRC. So I've been a product manager for probably 16 of those 18 years. So yeah, I've been a product manager for quite a while. So the product I'm going to talk to you about today is called CCH iFirm Validate. You may well have been on one of our webinars about AML or iFirm generally, to just introduce what iFirm is, which is our cloud suite of products going forward. But specifically about CCH iFirm Validate, I think it can best be described as an efficient and secure tool for confirming bank balances and bank transactional data for either an auditor or an accountant's client. We say it's efficient because it uses open banking. So rather than perhaps a more traditional method, what it uses via open banking is once the client has been through their open banking authorization process via their banking app or the banking website, then the data should be returned to validate within literally 2 to 3 minutes. And it's secure because rather than perhaps a traditional database, the whole data flow from end to end is secured via blockchain. It's pretty much guaranteeing that it can't be tampered with or accessed in any way without authority. So who is iFirm Validate designed for? Really, it's any size practice, and also any size practice who's got CCH Central. The reason we say CCH Central is that obviously is the core part of our on-premise suite. And as we introduce more tools in the cloud in iFirm, there will be this opportunity to be able to migrate clients as you want to, or if you don't want to yet migrate clients, then there will be this ability to effectively synchronize clients. So your client record for Validate still exists in Central. We just merely move the data we need into iFirm just for the job that we need to do, and keep that data in synchronization with Central. Two main use cases, but the main one is for an auditor who wants to either confirm a bank balance or request a range of transactions for an audit, as part of an audit, a bank confirmation process. Those bank transactions, it will be really the only restriction is what data the bank has available in terms of the length of time. Most banks have at least 2 years worth of data for bank transactions. A lot of the banks who use open banking have a lot more data. The additional use case that interests some of the people I've been speaking to is, as an accountant, I'm sure you've got clients who maybe aren't as organised as they could be, who don't do their own bookkeeping, equally perhaps aren't prepared to pay for a bookkeeping service. These are the type of clients who traditionally maybe turn up early January with a carrier bag full of receipts. If you can encourage that client to get into the habit of once a year receiving an email from you and going in via their open banking app and authorizing you to access the data, you can at least get all those banking transactions into your practice in a CSV file, so you can then start the process of preparing their accounts. So how does it work? If I just talk through the simple steps and then we'll run through a demo. So if you imagine you're in CCH Central, you open up a client, so you've got the client record in front of you. There's a task menu at the top, and within there, there'll be a button that will launch you into Validate. So when you land in iFirm, you can prepare your bank confirmation, and I'll show you what's needed for that in a moment. And the client will then receive an email from Validate with a link explaining the emails come from you. You'll have your logo there. So from that email with the logo, they can click on the link, log into their bank via open banking, and then authorize the access to the account. And then finally, that data will flow back in, whether it's a report of account balances or just a list of bank accounts or the transaction report. All that data is available within iFirm. So if I now go into Central, and we can run through the actual demo. So here I am in Central. I'm in my client record, imaginatively called Mark Limited, and you can see that in the task menu, I've got a button to launch into Validate. So what this will do is it will take me into the client. If I haven't already logged into iFirm that day, it would log me in through the login process, but it lands me on my what we refer to as the project list in Validate. So this is a list of the bank confirmations that I've run, what year they relate to, what client they relate to, when I created them, and what the due date is. At the moment, there's no reminding process in iFirm, and equally there's no reporting of job statuses, but that will come. So if I click New Project and search for my client that I've just brought in, you can see there's Mark Limited. We give it a name, so if I call it 2023 audit, and if I just put in today's date, put in the year end, and put in due date, and create project. So what I've done is I've created the fact that I need to run a bank confirmation, and you can see I've now landed into this new screen, which is titled Data Requests, and I can create a new request. If I put in the email address, we don't bring in email addresses from Central, and the reason being at the moment, predominantly if you're going to be running bank confirmations for limited companies, the limited company client doesn't have an email address. It will be those contacts, the directors, who may have an email address. And we don't know at this stage which email address for the various contacts and directors of a company you'd want to use. So that's something we're going to look at in the future, is whether at the point we bring the limited company client into iFirm, we can bring an email address in from a related contact. But for now, you just need to type it in. In terms of the scope of banks that support open banking, it's basically any UK bank that supports open banking we can access here. So whether your client has got banks with Barclays or HSBC or Nationwide, any of those banks or building societies, we can access data via here. For the purposes of this, being as I'm interacting in a sandbox environment, I am going to make a request to a bank called Mock. So I click Next. There are a few reports you can make, but what I'm just going to show you is 3. So if I know exactly what bank account I want details for, I can say account balance, okay, and it will ask me the date I want the balance, the account name, and the account number. If I don't know what I want, then I can ask for balance for all accounts, okay, and then it will just ask me for a date. I'm also going to ask for transactions for all accounts, and then also details for all accounts, which just returns back a list of accounts with today's balance. So if I choose balance for accounts, and just worth mentioning here, typically we would expect the balance for accounts to be at the period end date. So being as I've already provided the period end date, in a later update to this, what we're going to do is default to that period end date, so you don't have to rekey it. But for now, you need to type it in. Once we default to it, you'll still be able to specify a different date if you wanted to. For the purposes of this, I'm going to ask for just a month's worth of transactions. Another enhancement we're going to make in the future is once you've provided the email address, you won't need to rekey it for each of these reports. Once you've provided it once, we'll reuse it. But you can see all I've had to do is pick the bank, say the type of report I want and any specific dates, and then I click Send Requests, and that has gone through. Okay, so you can see it's got this status of sending. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes for the request to go from validate to the client, and then about 2 to 3 minutes once the client has made the approval for the data to flow back into validate. So if I have a look now and just show you the typical example email that a client will receive, I'm using a disposable email account which is called Yotmail, so it doesn't look particularly pretty, and you can see that the logo at the moment isn't coming through. But part of your iFirm instance, you'll be able to create your firm logo, and when you click on that logo, it will take them to your URL. But you can see that that is effectively your firm name. I'm in a test environment, and there is your email address, but that's my user's email address. Say I want to, I'll deal with questions at the end, Richard. So this is then the screen that the client sees when they click on the link, and again, this will have your logo on it, and it explains their email address, their name, what bank you're accessing and what details you want. And it's got your details on here as well, who's requested it and when. And what they do is they use our open banking provider is TrueLayer. This is a TrueLayer screen, but what I will show you in a moment is the actual bank screen. So when I click allow, what you're going to see is mock bank's login process, which isn't very detailed because it's only a mock account. But when they click allow, if they bank at Barclays, what they would be presented with would be their Barclays bank account login screen, where they would then log into Barclays, click a button to authorize the access. So I'm going to do that, but I'm doing it at mock bank, which I say this is their secure screen because it's just a test account. So if I type in I've logged into Mockbank. I clicked approve, pretend I've gone through and clicked approve on my Barclays screen, on my HSBC screen. And you'll see that that is now approved. So that's the step that the client goes through. They receive an email from you, they log into open banking, click a button to approve it, and then that's done. You'll see in this bottom panel, open banking allows us to hold that approval for 90 days. So by default, they're pre-approved any subsequent requests you make within that same scope. So with the same bank for the same accounts, any further requests you make within 90 days, they'll get an email to say you've made an additional request within the scope of pre-approval. If they don't want to do that, they can deselect that and then they will approve each step as it goes through. So that's the client step. So if we now come back here, and if I look at the one that I prepared earlier, so the requests that I sent through, you'll see now that they are all hyperlinks. Okay, so the data has come back into validate. So if I show you detailed for all accounts to start with, that is a list. And keep in mind, this is a test environment and it is the bank is mock. So some of the data might not look too realistic, but this is a list of accounts that the client had as at yesterday when I made this request. Okay, so you've got the balance as at yesterday, you've got the type of accounts, we've got credit accounts, savings accounts, and what they refer to here in mock bankers transaction accounts, but that would be a current account. And from here, I can print them all off to PDF. If you've got CCH documents, what we'll be doing is downloading all these reports into documents for you as well. And from here, I can also go and have a look at balance for all accounts, which looks very similar, apart from it's giving me the balance of the date I specified in my request. So this is the balance as at all of my 31st December for all of my accounts. And then finally, transactions for all accounts. This is a CSV file for each one of those accounts for that month that I requested from December 1st to 31st December. So if I click on one, it's a CSV file, and again, we'll be able to store this into documents for you. If I just open that, it will launch into Excel. Right, if I clicked on it, there we go. So nothing too exciting to see because it's a CSV file, but we've got a unique transaction ID, we've got an amount, we've got the number, whether it's a credit, a debit, a description, and also a memo, whatever that memo might be. So direct debit, card payment, check payment, etc. There's some example ones here, and then the transaction date. Okay, so that data is in a format now where you can start to manipulate it and use it as part of your accounts preparation or audit job. So if I now go back to my presentation, so just to run through those key points again. So integrated with central means that you minimize the risk of rekeying data. And also similar to what we do with AML, we will be able to in the future bring back within central the status of jobs. That's something we're going to be looking at. Open banking, as I say, the speed, the data is returned within 2 to 3 minutes. In fact, that client authorization that I went through with Mockbank, I'll be able to go and have a look at that client in a minute or two, and all the data will be there as well. And also accuracy. You know, this is via open banking. There is no person deciding what data is required and copying it. It's the live open banking data. And just for clarity, all we're getting is read-only access. The scope of the authorization for open banking, we haven't obviously got any update rights. It's purely read-only access to the data that's been requested. It utilizes blockchain, so we've got that end-to-end security, and also from an external evidence point of view, you can sort of guarantee it's reliable and not being tampered with in any way. And then finally, those transactions are returned in CSV format, ready to reuse and import without having to rekey or copy or paste. There's a couple of areas we're going to be looking at for the future. So I've touched on reporting and reminders. The scope of the data we can get from a bank confirmation process at the moment is data that's available via open banking. So I know that for some audit jobs, there's a need for additional requests, additional data. So we're looking at how we can manage that. Let's think of it more of a document collaboration workflow of getting a request from you to the client and to the bank. And also there's the opportunity for other third-party confirmations I know has been looking at. I didn't touch on this at the beginning. Validate it's a global product. So what you've got here is the UK version, which is the scope of currently is UK banks, but there's a version of this software that's in the North American market using bank confirmations for North America. So that is very quickly is me. So I'll now go through and have a look at a couple of questions. So anonymous person, how does client approval work with multiple bank signatories? So my understanding of open banking, and nobody has yet corrected me on this, so please feel free. If it's an open banking, you only need one authorizer. So even if it's an account where it might be multi-signatory for a check or multi-signatory to sign up a direct debit, open banking access only usually requires that one person to log into open banking and approve it. So Fortier has asked, when the client allows access in the first year, how long does that authority remain active so we can request again? So the scope of open banking is a maximum of 90 days. So when the client goes through that authorization process, the pre-approval that was down the bottom of that screen is valid for 90 days. Open banking won't allow us to go beyond that 90 days. Is there going to be any developments to request bank accounts and balances for Europe and America? So the provider for open banking that we're using at the moment is TrueLayer. We have focused initially on UK, but TrueLayer certainly have relationships that are European wide in terms of open, the European versions of open banking. So that absolutely is something we're going to look at in the future. Going to America, obviously I've mentioned we've got a version of this software. America don't use any of these automated open banking style processes, and but our American version of the product does have a lot of relationships already with US banks, so there's no reason why we couldn't look at piggybacking off those in the future. There are also some comments in chat, I think, which I've just lost. We'll get a copy of the slides. Yes, apologies, I should have mentioned that. Slides will come through to you at the end. And that's what have been replied to. Okay, I can't see there's any actual questions in the chat, just in chat. Can the requests for information say 3 months in advance of the year end? You can't, to the date of request, open banking hasn't got that future date, so you're always looking at today and backwards. So one way you might decide to use the process is shortly after year end, you might do the initial request just to get the balances, so that when you get your set of accounts through, you've got your account balances to look at, but then you've got that 90 days to ask for additional data. What you can't do is, I use 31st December 23 as my year end. In November, you can't have an authority in place to cover the data in November up beyond 31st December. You would get the client to do an authority for maybe transactions up to November, in November, and then you've still got that 90-day window to then make a subsequent request post year end for the rest of the transactions and the account balances. Okay, so assuming that the pre-approval stays as it should with the client and they don't deselect it, you could get them to approve before year end and then do a supplementary request post year end. What is the cost to us/client? So similar to other products, there'll be banded based on usage. as a ballpark for access to a bank. So in the scope of what I received there for Mock Bank, which was one bank and half a dozen accounts, depending on usage, that would be somewhere between 25 and 35 pounds, depending on what banding you went for. And I think that I have covered all the items in the chat. So is there any other questions? Is it business bank accounts only or personal accounts? It's anything you can get via open banking. So I've tested it for one of my personal accounts. So yeah, absolutely, it's personal accounts. I've covered off the how much. So is there going to be any developments for bringing information for invoice financing factors and mortgage data? Mortgage data for me would come under that other style of banking data that's not available via open banking. So that's something that we could be looking at, we will be looking at in terms of whether it's viable or not. The other areas that I know there's interest in from a global perspective is your trade receivables and trade payables, your third party suppliers and customers. So that's something that we're at early stages of looking at the moment. Similarly, credit cards, from memory, credit cards are beyond the scope of open banking. So again, that would be part of any additional data you would request. And I think that I have dealt with all of the questions. I appreciate that the webinar was set for an hour. As you've seen, the product is really designed to do a job, and that job is very quick and easy in terms of what the auditor or accountant needs to do, what the client needs to do, and the scope of the data that comes back. So I will hold on for another minute or two, but if there's no further questions, I think we can call it a day.
Yeah,
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. And just a quick one from me. So obviously you will receive the recording so you can review the demo again, and you can share that with any of your colleagues, of course. If you have specific questions about how to sign up to this, you can speak to your water school account manager. We'll put details of how to do that in our follow-up as well. If you've got any other questions, then please do fire them at your account manager. They'll be very happy to help you. I don't think there's any other questions that have come through. So nice quick one for you all today. So you can have some time back on us. You're very welcome. So thank you very much, Mark, for that presentation. And
no problem.
yeah, we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks very much.
Thank you.